One thing that, as we were talking about this, stood out a little bit. At no point in my football consciousness has it, at least to me, has my personal experience been that it was a big deal to have an African American quarterback. It wasn't weird to me to see Quinn Grovey at the position. It wasn't weird for me for any of the other guys. It's just that's how life is. It's not. But apparently,
Not in 1984, it wasn't.
apparently it was. So, like I said, two different generations.
It was a huge deal, and he and I have become really great friends over the years. Greg Thomas was the first starting black quarterback for Arkansas. Also happened to be the winningest quarterback in Arkansas Razorback history. A little trivia note for people who missed that question. And Greg and I are still great friends. He's an assistant basketball coach in the Plano East school system and works drug counseling kids and has for decades, and lives somewhere up there north of that. He doesn't live in Plano. I think it's in Collin County, but it's not in Plano. Greg went through, and this was not covered in his book very much at all, as much as I thought it should have been. He went through the depths of hell when he was named starting quarterback by Hatfield. And I honestly don't think Ken Hatfield understood what he got himself into, and probably didn't handle it the best due to lack of preparation. I don't think Ken understood the culture of Arkansas, even though he probably should have. I don't think he understood the culture at the time and the mindset of a lot of people that they weren't ready to accept an African American quarterback. Although Greg will tell you real quick, nobody in his family ever lived in Africa, and he ain't never been there. He's black, to quote him. It's something that Ken completely misunderstood, and Kent wasn't the best with dealing with criticism, because if you remember Hatfield's way of dealing with criticism, in my opinion, was to get defiant, was to bow his back and go, really? Okay. He got that way in 87. That's when he ripped it with the fans, and the problem started before the Jesus wept, because Ken did not particularly care for let's face it, after that Texas game in 87 that we talked about where he screwed up the management at the end of the game, he was dog cussed. I mean, dog cussed, going up that ramp at War Memorial Stadium to the locker room. People threw things on him, threw beer on him and stuff. And that really ticked Hatfield off.
Yeah, I've heard stories about, and I don't know if that's the game that took place, but I've heard stories about, because my family really respected Hatfield. They thought a lot of him and didn't, they thought Frank ran him off. It sounds like it's a little bit of a different story, but they didn't like that apparently the Arkansas fans spit on him at some point when he was exiting, I guess, through the crowd, through one of those tunnels at War Memorial.
Well, I thought Ken was going to go up in the stands after. I thought he was fixing to try to jump up and get up in the stands when they were throwing this stuff at him.
Well, I don't
And
know why how he didn't. I mean, could you imagine if that happened to Pittman right now?
Pittman could jump up the
Well, no, I know
damn.
Pittman wouldn't jump up, but just
No,
treating
he
Cook
couldn't.
like that.
But I mean, it's Ken did not handle criticism well. He couldn't deal with it. He didn't like it from us in the media. He didn't care for it from the fans. He thought it ought to be like back when he played in 64, 63, 62, that everybody one happy family, go team, and all that. There was a lot of the old schoolboy rah rah in Kent that he didn't move forward with the times a lot. And none of that was reflected more than his handling of Greg Thomas. And he learned a lot through that. But he saw something in Greg and made him the starting quarterback as a freshman. And that's what set the tone off with a lot of Razorback fans. And they were quick to jump on any mistake and very slow to praise and uh, offer praise or congratulations or anything else when he was successful. And I was in Dallas at the time, and I thought it was disgraceful for the state where I grew up and things to be acting like that. And I was kind of like Skip Bayless is now on Fox with the Cowboys. You know, the Razorbacks were my team. I was the only guy in the Dallas media that really stood up and championed their cause in Dallas Fort Worth at the time. And it really offended me the way that the Arkansas people were. And Rick Schaefer and Greg showed me boxes of letters that Greg got from fans. And I got news for a lot of you. I remember the names that were at the bottom of those letters, and you're still around. And I know where some of you sit at the Razorback games now. I still see you there. I'm not going to come up and challenge you on it. That's history, that's ancient history, but I remember, and I hope you do too, because it was a shameful period of time and it was statewide. Trust me, it wasn't limited to one geographical area, one city area, but they were really vocal at him. And I'm sure Ken Hatfield heard some of the same things from a lot of people. And a lot of that affected his time here. But I've said this and I've told Quinn Grovey this. What Greg went through dealing with all that made life much easier for Quinn as the quarterback that followed him.
Well, I'll say two things here. One, I'm surprised it took till the 80s, and that in the 80s this was still a big deal. Uh, but it also definitely speaks a lot to what Greg apparently went through and did, and how he changed the overall feeling. Because by the time Quinn came around, and Quinn was the first quarterback that I knew of as a quarterback, um, it just wasn't a big deal. And growing up here, grew up in South Arkansas, you heard things, but I never heard anything spoken in that way about Quinn Grovey. I heard some things that were said and done regarding Nolan Richardson, which, the way you feel about what was said and done about Greg Thomas, I feel the same way about some of the things that were said and done regarding Nolan Richardson. But when it came to Quinn Grovey, he was loved and respected, and no one seemed to care what color his skin was by the time I came into consciousness. And believe me, I came into contact with some people to where if it was a big deal, it would have been stated without hesitation.
And Greg and Nolan came along at a time that we probably should do a longer feature, ESPN 30 for 30 type thing on an amateurish basis about 84, 85. In my opinion, as I go back and look now, being an old man, that was really a years of change, two very critical changes for the University of Arkansas. They had a first black quarterback and the first black basketball coach at the same time. And Nolan helped Greg a lot. Nolan sort of saw what he was going through and helped out with it. And this is something that we probably should look at doing, and probably will, because both of them are still alive and you can interview both of them. We don't have to deal with dead people.
Yeah, the further out I get and further I get into life, having a daughter who I've been fortunate that, she's made it further than Nolan's daughter did, and having also gone through the cancer stuff, I have no idea how Nolan made it through going through that with his daughter and dealing with all the stuff that he was dealing uh, with some of the fans and trying to build that program. I don't see how, like, that man had to be Superman, because I don't see how emotionally you get through it. Now, I know once I got around to covering Nolan, um, some of that's, you could tell things had kind of worn on him over the years.
By the end,
He was
he was
definitely a very
mad.
emotions on his sleeve, I don't care what anybody thinks kind of guy by the time I got.
He was mad and looking for a fight.
Yeah. But you see what he went through and what he experienced, and you put that in perspective, and you think about going through all that at the same time, it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense now.
It doesn't excuse everything, but at least there's a perspective there and you understand a lot more.
Well, I understand it. I understood it then. That he's dealing with a lot, and I thought it was a shameful period of time in Razorback history. And at the time, again, being in Dallas and being one of the few people that really kind of was on the Razorback side on this stuff, I got to hear it from a lot of fans in Dallas about my coverage of the Razorbacks being tilted toward the Razorbacks. Well, yeah, it was. Sorry. Nobody else was tilting it toward them at all in Texas. So I was kind of doing that. And yeah, it was a period of time that Arkansas fans probably should not be the proudest of. A lot of them try to act conveniently now like it didn't happen, but yeah, it did. It happened. And there's nothing, that's going to change it now. We can argue about it, talk about it. Nothing's going to change it. I think Nolan's moved on. I think Greg certainly has moved on. Frank and Roy Kramer knew each other, had the head of the SEC, and Roy Kramer had a problem that the SEC basketball tournament, men's basketball tournament, was held in Birmingham, Alabama every year. And Kentucky fans were the only ones that showed up.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 90% Kentucky Blue attendance.
Which is what I remember the Southwest Conference tournament being too. The whole Barnhill South thing at Reunion Arena in Dallas.
Yeah. Well, Kramer needed somebody to come in for basketball for Kentucky to have some competition. So Kramer reached out to Broyles. Arkansas got the SEC invitation because of basketball, not football.
Thank you, Nolan Richardson.
Exactly. Arkansas got into the SEC because of basketball, not football. If football had been the sole determining factor, the SEC didn't need Arkansas.
Try to remember, did they open Bud Walton? They opened Bud Walton before they went to the SEC, didn't they?
No,
No?
they opened Bud Walton 93-94 season national championship. They opened Bud Walton with a national championship.